morning, everyone. I'm Karen Holzer. I'm the Senior Director of Patient Advocacy here at Bio. Welcome to the May Coffee Chat, where we'll talk about the secret to success, how to start and be successful as a patient advocacy organization. I know times have probably like it's been a really interesting time to start a patient advocacy organization, and there's so many things happening that it can be really difficult to stay on top of things. I know just last night we heard, for those who are following it, that there seems to be good news and that orphan cures might be or looks like it will be part of the reconciliation package. And I know there's a lot of stuff happening all the time. So I thought we would spend the May Coffee Chat hearing from really amazing leaders from the patient advocacy world, how they got started, how they work in coalitions, how they keep track of everything that's happening, and what tips and tricks they have. In the chat, you will see the bios of our amazing panelists. I will not spend a lot of time, and I will ask each panelist to start off by giving us a little bit of background about themselves, about how they ended up in patient advocacy, about the amazing organizations that they're leading, and then started from there. With that, Jim, would you like to get started and start us off this morning?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. This is a conversation that's very near and dear to my heart, so really appreciate the chance to talk to everybody. My name is Jim Palma. I'm the CEO of Target Cancer Foundation, and we're a rare cancer research and patient support foundation located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I also sit in the board of directors of NORD, where I kind of take a broader look at rare diseases in a general sense. Like probably everybody on the call today, and so many people, certainly in the disease nonprofit community, I was brought into this world through the experience of a loved one. In that case, that was my brother-in-law, Paul, who was diagnosed with a rare cancer called cholangiocarcinoma in his late 30s. And despite being in Boston at a top medical center, Paul very quickly learned that his cancer had no treatments available for it, which was quite a shock. And over the course of the just under 2 years that he was treated, he really never received a treatment that was particularly effective. So he started the foundation himself while he was being treated in an effort to bring greater awareness to this situation in rare cancers, but also start to drive research as well. Sadly, he passed away shortly after, but we've kept the foundation going ever since, and we're in our 16th year now. And today, really focus on a variety of different initiatives, most notably a clinical trial called TRACK, focusing on precision medicine and rare cancers. But as an umbrella organization, we look at the challenges that face patients with rare cancers as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here. Can't wait to dive deeper into this. But before we go there, Kelly, could I ask you to go next? I know that your story has a lot of similarities to Jim's.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Kelly Brazo, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cure LGMD2I Foundation. My daughter Samantha, when she was 2 years old, was diagnosed with this ultra-rare form of muscular dystrophy called limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, of which we had never heard of prior to this. And having been a speech therapist by trade at the time, we were told, sorry, there's really no treatments for your daughter at the NIH. And I said, well, what do I do? What can I do for her? They said, start a foundation and raise money. There's just not enough research in this space because it's so rare. So I took that as sort of a prescription pad and kind of ran with it. Having had no nonprofit background, I tried to figure it out as a side hustle. And really, this is our 15th year. And just last year, took it on as my full-time job now. I'm, just the first paid employee of the foundation after 14 years. So I'm able to really focus full-time and not just a side hustle like it started out as. And fast forward,
It on there.
uh, fast forward, we still don't have an approved therapy, but that being said, we have three clinical trials in development. One of them is in phase 3. We have two phase 1, 2 gene therapy trials, all of which have orphan drug designation and rare disease classification. So we're excited about the future, but really it's just been about 2 years that we really started focusing on the advocacy piece. At the beginning it was strictly fundraising for as much science as we could support. We granted over 20 different scientific research grants and supported scientific and patient conferences. But just in the last few years, we really took a big dive into the advocacy space, and I'm still learning, but I'm really excited to be part of this panel to share what I've learned so far and what I can and hope how I can learn from the rest of you on the call.
Thank you so much for being here, Kelly. Sheila, may I ask you to go next? Because again, I think there's so many similarities.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. And thanks so much, Karen, for inviting me to participate in today's conversation. My name is Ashira Vantries, and I am the Director of Legal Strategy and Advocacy at Aimed Alliance. If you're not familiar with Aimed Alliance, we're a nonprofit health policy organization whose mission is to protect and enhance the rights of healthcare consumers and providers. But I'm also here wearing my second hat as Athena's sister. So I also work with KIF1A.org, which is Athena's ultra rare condition, just like Kelly. That was really started from the same basis. Luke Rosen, the founder, and his wife, their daughter Susanna, was one of the first children diagnosed with KIF1A. And so they started this foundation really with the goal of finding a treatment for KIF1A. And as the organization has grown and my sister was diagnosed 5 years ago, I had this unique opportunity to bring my skills and knowledge from Aimed Alliance and working in this health policy space to our KIF1A organization and help make sure that the treatments that we think are so important are adequately supported within policy. And that's like a really, I think, important piece of getting the treatments and research that we want for our family. So happy to be here and talk more about KIF1A and all the work that we're doing, and Aimed Alliance, of course.
Thank you so much for being here. And this idea of so many patient groups facing the same challenges and that there's so much we can learn across is something that is really near and dear to my heart. And Pat, I know it's at the center of a lot of what you are doing as part of the MapRx Coalition, etc. So I was wondering if I can ask you to go next, talk a little bit about who you are, how you came here, and some of the amazing coalition work that you are doing.
Sure. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. And yeah, so I'm Pat Wildman, Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Government Relations at the Lupus Foundation of America. And at LFA, we focus on advancing lupus through research, awareness, advocacy, and education. And I also wear another hat, and that's to help convene the MapRx Coalition, which is focused on all things Medicare Part D. So it's interesting to have kind of those two experiences, both in the coalition side of it, but also on the disease-specific side. And my path to this world isn't an unusual one. I worked on the Hill, and healthcare was one of the myriad issues that I worked in at the time, and it was a pretty dynamic issue when I was on the Hill. It still is. It was very interesting to me, and I ended up moving to the patient advocacy world really just through a connection, through someone I worked with on the Hill whose spouse was in the patient advocacy world, and that's how I got in, and have had the good fortune of working with a number of organizations over the years, including Rich Brennan's organization, the ALS Association, and now the past almost 9 years with lupus. So thanks again, Karen. I really look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, Kim. I know NHC is one of these really amazing umbrella organizations that just really helps keep track of all the different issues and to be able to make progress on so many things that are happening right now. Could I ask you to briefly introduce yourself and your organization?
Sure. Thanks, Karen, and so nice to see everyone. I'm Kimberly Beer. Kim's fine. I'm the Senior VP of Policy and External Affairs of the National Health Council, and I just completed 2 months here. I just spent 8 years at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. I headed up their Policy and Advocacy Department. And prior to that, I was with the Arthritis Foundation and Susan G. Komen. I also came through patient advocacy and through the Hill, but also I have a master's degree in counseling. I've worked separately for another nonprofit here in DC, working directly with individuals living with developmental disabilities for 18 years. And I also was heavily influenced growing up by constant discussions of health insurance in my family and making sure people had coverage and navigating systems. And my dad was part of a union. And so all the negotiations around healthcare, I constantly heard conversations around the importance of having coverage and having access to healthcare and how important this was, almost above and beyond like a salary. Sometimes it felt that way. So I was very intrigued by the healthcare ecosystem. And also, I was influenced, I was younger at the time, but the HIV movement too, the HIV advocacy movement was pretty extraordinary to see in high school and in college, to see that community come together in such a powerful way to make changes. And so at the NHC, I'm privileged here now to work with a lot of my colleagues with whom I've worked with for the last 20 years, and still getting my legs from under me, but we're of course tracking all the patient advocacy related issues that impact their daily lives, as well as our other members whom are part of our business and industry partners, and also our partners of organizations like provider groups and stuff. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this very large organization and learn how to navigate everyone's interests, but that really at the core of it are patient needs and improving their lives. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. To start the conversation off today, I was wondering if I can ask each of you to talk about one thing that you wished you had known when you got started in patient advocacy, or one piece of advice that you would like to share with everybody on the call today. And again, Jim, would you mind going first?
Sure, happy to. So there's probably a long list of things I could choose from here. Like so many people, when we moved into this world, we did so with really no experience whatsoever in disease advocacy, rare disease advocacy specifically. Research funding only to the extent that we knew that our family's experience was impacted by the fact that there was no research funding into the type of cancer my brother-in-law had. So any number of things could apply here. But I think maybe the most important one that I would talk about and really urge people to think about as they start foundations is just the concept of leverage. So, when you move into this world and you're learning on the job about so many factors, and maybe doing so at the same time that you're caring for a loved one or something like that, it can be very easy to sort of set goals and then just try to orient your foundation towards accomplishing those goals, in the best way you can. But often what that can lead to is kind of reinventing the wheel. So when I talk to groups that are starting out and they're talking about things like building a patient registry or trying to create a tissue bank or something like that, these are things that many of us spend years and years and lots of money doing, when there may already be an existing platform that you can just very easily and cheaply leverage in a much quicker way. So I think, what I would really, something that would have been very valuable to us early on, and something I would really tell people to think about is before you move forward on initiatives like the ones I was talking about, really explore the landscape as best you can. Connect with broader organizations like a NORD or a Global Genes or Bio or anyone who might be able to help to direct you towards existing resources, because there's a good chance, I know of many different platforms, registry platforms, certainly NORD has a great one, that people can kind of sort of walk right into rather than building. In addition, there are a lot of scientific organizations that help to facilitate tissue collection and that kind of thing, when the alternative might be trying to fund the creation of a resource like that yourself. By leveraging an existing resource, you'll move faster, save money that you can then put towards other work, and probably speed along your mission in a really meaningful way.
I see a lot of head nodding. Any, any reactions to that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, Pat.
Oh, sorry, Kelly. We're probably going to say the same thing. No, I agree 100% with what Jim said, and I think and some of that starts with networking and participating in coalitions and getting to know other people who are doing your job. That's been extremely helpful for me throughout my career. Just learning, how do other people do things? Even as simple as And we just finished our advocacy day, our Big Hill Day. And I remember early in my career, and had the good fortune of having a great mentor. We used to go to different advocacy days, put on by different organizations to learn how do they do it and what ideas can we take from what they're doing and apply it to our disease. But some of that starts with getting to know people, and coalitions is the easy way. Not only is you're getting information that can help in your advocacy and help, on the issues and getting to understand and learn about issues, but you're getting to know a whole network of people that you can turn to for advice, for, what's their take on an issue or how they're doing something, or if it's things like, Jim, you were talking about patient registries, what are they doing in this space? There's a whole lot of doors that can be opened up just through networking and participating in coalitions and getting to know your peers. So I think that's the one thing that I learned really early in my career, the importance of that.
And I'll just tag off of that. Those are all great points. That the biggest word I could say to everyone is learn how to delegate and confidently. And that's something it took me a long time. The type A personality, I just try to do everything by myself. Burning the midnight oil, figuring out. I built my own first website with zero tech experience, but we didn't have the money, and what money we raised, we wanted to go towards science. And fast forward, after almost 15 years now, it's amazing in our little LGMD2I community how many talented, gracious people that just want to give back and give how they can. And a lot of them can't give financially, and they're not able to travel to clinical trials or to conferences. But I had someone a patient of ours completely revamp our website and make it look much better. I have someone else who does our design work. He's a graphic designer for Adobe. And sure enough, when we have to do graphic design, I'm no longer spending my hours on Canva trying to figure out how to make a nice, and they all do it voluntarily because they want to be able to give back in whichever way they can. And two, just continuing to grow that social media base. Our LGMD2I Facebook page, although it's an ultra rare disease, we have about 1,500 people in that space. And so that's where you have to, use that to constantly empower your community and ask for that help of, hey, who's good at, web design? Who's good at, communications, things like that. And we don't have the budget to take on employees, but we can definitely take on volunteers. And so just being able to ask for help, it's amazing how much more impactful you can be. And the benefit of these virtual meetings and being able to do this, because our patients are spread all over the country, so we don't have a home office where we have people to meet in person, but make use of the virtual meetups as much as you can.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Kelly. I think one of the things that I learned both starting at Aimed Alliance and then with KIF1A is that also like there's so much value in community. When I first started at Aimed Alliance, my sister, it was very different than a lot of the kids in our community because my sister was diagnosed with KIF1A when she was 20 years old. She was undiagnosed up until then. And so I had always, grown up around this disability community, which is very similar, but also unique to, I think, the rare disease community. And so I had seen all of these barriers with insurance, and it wasn't until I started working at Aimed Alliance that I realized that these were systematic, right? I always thought that we were just really unlucky, we were just unlucky, right? When it's really these are broad practices that we see that are impacting everyone with this condition and other disorders. And then when I started working at or volunteering with kif1a.org and I got connected to the online, Facebook group, it was incredible to see all of the families sharing their stories of things that, I saw with my sister Athena growing up, being able to just kind of share that community feedback. And I think what I would want people to know when they're starting out a patient advocacy organization is just that inherent piece is so incredibly valuable. I can't imagine what things would have looked like if for the first 20 years of my sister's life, we had access to that network of families who could help us say, hey, this treatment isn't working, but here's this one. Hey, we found this great doctor. Hey, we found this thing that's been really helpful. That in itself is really incredible and really empowering. And so as I think you're working to these bigger goals of, getting treatments, reducing these access barriers, just remembering that that foundation that's been created is incredible and really important.
I think I agree with all of my colleagues. I would say, really understanding the other point of view of your the argument that you're setting for yourself, you have to understand the other players and what they're advocating for too, first and foremost, to strengthen your own case. And you have to do that every single time. I think doing this for as long as we've been doing it, you see a lot of these are the same issues sort of resurfacing with new flavors. So you have at least a history of understanding it, but really doing your homework, understanding the points of view from your, the counterparts who are advocating for something different is really important.
Yeah, Karen, I wanted to jump into pick up on something Kelly was talking about volunteers. A lot of us, our bandwidth is limited in our ability to do things, and we certainly try to we have burned the midnight oil, and we want to do as much as we possibly can, but there's not enough hours in the day. So yeah, leveraging volunteers is really, really important. Not only to identify who's interested, who has the passion, who wants to get involved, who may already have some expertise in their own personal life and their own professional life. They're out there, and making use of them is really important. It helps it can help in a lot of different ways. But that's been a huge part of our work. And even today in Lupus, we have a network of community volunteer leaders that, we don't have a huge chapter network, but we do have volunteers out there that help lead our advocacy work at the grassroots level in certain states. And a lot of it's federal work that they're doing, but they're passionate about it and they get more people involved. And they help do things that we just don't have the capacity to do. So volunteers play a huge role, and certainly don't overlook them.
And that brings me to a question that I know I was struggling with when I was in patient advocacy. It's like, how do you communicate with your volunteers if there's lack of certainty? I know oftentimes, in particular when you're working on policy issues, things can shift quite quickly. And like, how do you communicate about progress and about these issues, understanding that there's a lot of uncertainty? Any tips, tricks, best practices?
I've oversaw 3 separate grassroots programs, or supervised the staff who did them. And again, if you have the privilege of having staff, so I acknowledge that is a privilege. If and when you can hire somebody, I recommend that be the first person you hire, to have a grassroots person cultivate and educate consistently throughout the year and keep in contact and be able to educate them in sort of plain English. But you'd be shocked. The top level advocates are very well informed. They understand the process. So really understanding and tiering your advocates, but you have to develop a relationship with them. You have to understand their story and you have to stay in contact with them. So it can't just be one and done, and then you don't talk to them for 6 months. So that takes a lot of time. It takes a full-time staff person, if not more. So if you don't have those resources, then doing your best to stay connected either through a short newsletter or short calls that don't have to be overly scripted with a ton of slides. You don't need all of that. Just be as honest and straightforward with your community as you can, and also acknowledging that there are always different factors at play at once, and that while it may seem obvious to a patient or an individual or a grassroots foot person, and they're sort of adamant, like, well, this doesn't make any sense. You are as the leader factoring in a lot of other components to that. So there is a skill in making sure that you communicate that as best as you can, and that you're doing the best you can with the information you have at the time.
Yeah, and I just want to, sorry, I was just going to say, I think one of the things that when I started with KIF1A a couple of years ago, one of the things that we wanted to do is really, I think, address like that challenge, especially I think in the ultra rare disease space of like, we're working towards a treatment and that's like a really long-term goal. And so I think it can be difficult to keep people engaged when that long-term goal can kind of feel out of reach, because there's so many things that go into it and before you get that treatment. And so when we decided to set our policy positions, we surveyed the community to first understand what the issues are, even though, we thought we knew them, the type of insurance our families had, because that's, I think, really important in helping people understand, like, if we're working for a state law, here's who it's going to help. And a lot of our families are dual in that they have commercial insurance and they have Medicaid. But I think that's a huge part of it. And what I think we did, which will be most impactful in the long term, is setting up our goals as short-term and long-term goals and spreading them out. Like our short-term goals are things that can help our families now. So is it going to be prior authorization reform, better access to Medicaid, easier enrollment in the waiver programs, right? Those are all things that we know are going to have an immediate impact on our families and can help them while we are working toward that bigger goal of getting a treatment, which is much more, I think, policy orientated and protecting the environment that we want for innovation. But we always want to make sure, I think, that your families are able to see some sort of short-term impact from all their advocacy work, because it is emotionally exhausting being continually asked to share your story over and over again and not seeing any fruition to that. So I think tiering it that way helps ensure you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think kind of to bridge that gap, again, we don't have the staff for that, but what we do is utilize the powers that be of the advocacy space for rare diseases. So like you said, Jim, earlier, Every Life Foundation, a lot of our patients are physically disabled. They're not able to get to Capitol Hill. If you've been there, you realize it's not the most accessible place to be. And so, but there are programs like Rare Across America where it's all virtual Hill meetings that you can do, and they make it so easy and so streamlined. And so our community trusts us as advocacy leaders in this smaller space, but so they might not be confident enough to go do something like Every Life has themselves. But if we help kind of bridge that communication, sending them the action alerts that Nord and Bio and Every Life have, sending that through our email databases, through our social media accounts, and then also encouraging them to take part in things like Rare Across America, where they can feel empowered and advocate from the comfort of their home. And there are so many tools out there that I'm not going to try. I don't have the bandwidth to try to recreate a wheel that's already so expertly done. But really just trying to marry the two, our smaller community with those bigger resources, I think is sort of for us is the best of both worlds.
I'll go back to something I think you said about surveying the community. Yeah, that's always been really important because, yeah, we think we know what everyone's priorities are, what are important to them, but that's not always the case. So it's really important. I found to survey the community, and it's different segments of the community because there's the patient community, there's the caregiver community, there's the research community, there's physicians. Depending on your organization, your structure, and who your stakeholders are. So you want to get those differences of opinion, but also internally too, staff. Depending on the size of the organization, it's getting survey staff. What are they seeing as the challenges and the priorities for the organization in advocacy and government relations, and your leadership too. I've done surveys of our board, asking them what are their priorities, what do they see as big issues, and they may approach it. Particularly board members may approach the issues from different, through different lenses, whether it's as a caregiver or someone living with a disease, or someone who's really the connection is different to the disease, and they may have a different perspective. But that kind of helps not only give us as staff a better sense of where the community is at, but it also gets to buy-in and increase participation in what we do over the long term, the short and long term. When people know that you want to hear from them, they're part of the policy development and they can be part of the solution. So it's really helped in that respect as well. And one thing I wanted to mention, because I think you're going to get to this, Karen, but I'm going to preempt it. One thing, like trying to pick the issues, it's really hard because there's so many of them out there that impact all of us. And one of the things I've tried to do is look at what is systemic, what impacts everybody, and then separate that from if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it, and that kind of helps us to prioritize and figure out what do we need to spend most of our time on, and where else can we have a big impact without spending a ton of time on. It's some of those systemic issues, and that's what coalitions really help, and leveraging what coalitions can do. But that's probably the number one question that I ask when we're looking at an issue is it lupus specific? And if we don't do it, does that mean nobody's going to do it? So that's been helpful as we've been trying to prioritize and many, many different issues that impact all of us.
I think that's a great point, Pat. And I think you can even bring that back to the original question that Karen asked about sort of advice for new foundations, because what you're talking about can also be applied to when you're really trying to figure out just exactly what the direction of your foundation would be. You may be advocating for a particular disease, but what are you doing within that disease? And that's where, again, I think that kind of landscape analysis from the outset is really critical. It's not uncommon in the rare disease world that there will be multiple patient advocacy organizations in the same very rare disease or condition. That happens a lot. And if you're finding yourself in a space where there are other people who are focusing on the same area, really finding your niche is critical. Again, you never want to reinvent the wheel. If somebody's already doing something well, dedicating a foundation to trying to replicate that probably isn't the best use of resources, but nobody can do everything, or most people can't do everything. So I think really from the beginning, trying to identify, is there a need, and what specifically is that need? If someone's already doing patient support, maybe your organization can focus on research or policy or something different. Or maybe there's even an opportunity to join forces with that existing organization rather than even starting a new foundation. But for people who are starting a new foundation, really taking time to do that analysis, figure out where your resources, which may be limited, where they're going to be best utilized, can really lead to not only a more successful organization, but a better coalition of organizations focused in the same area who will be able to work and complement each other as they go forward.
Yeah, and sorry, Kelly, you go ahead first.
Oh, that's all right. Well, I was just going to say a prime example that, I'm really proud of our greater LGMD space. So, and most of you probably don't know what it is, but limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, there's actually 32 different subtypes, all with different genetic causes, but they're all similar in their features and their progression. And so what we've done and all of the major advocacy steps that we've done from the patient listening session, we've done an ELPFDD, we've done our first Hill Day last year, we even did the first scientific workshop. And what we've done is we surveyed the community. We have two umbrella orgs within the LGMD space, the Speak Foundation and LGMD Awareness Foundation. And then there are a handful of smaller subtype organizations like mine that's specific to 2I. And so what we do is we survey all of those orgs and say, hey, well, we decided we're going to do a patient listening session. Who's in? And some bow out, say we don't have the bandwidth, we're not ready yet. Same thing with applying for an ICD-10 code. Who wants to join this battle with us? And we have a representative from each of the communities that said yes. And then we work together, because if anyone's done a PFDD before, it takes really a full year and a ton of money. So we're able to pool our resources and really work as a team for those that want to participate. But it's all in, it's the financial component, it's the time component. You have to be able to bring something to the table. And really, we've done a good job of not competing in those spaces, because if there's 32 types of limb girdle, the last thing the FDA has time for is hearing 32 different limb girdle stories, especially now. So if, to your point, Jim, if you are able to find similar organizations where you have, some sort of genetic, reasonable likelihood that they can be related, try to team up if you can, because it's a big burden, but also the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's true. Like, even at Aimed Alliance, I think our kind of niche is that we're staffed by a team of attorneys, and so we do kind of have that extra legal knowledge, and so we do a lot of legal analysis, and we make sure we spend our time there, where we know we can add a lot of value. But we also participate in like a lot of the bigger coalitions, because those things are important to us as well. But I just wanted to circle back to a point that Pat made about serving your community and the importance of serving diverse stakeholders in your community, like not only the patients, the caregivers, the researchers, your providers, but also specifically within your patient community, making sure you're getting folks across the spectrum. So my sister Athena turns 25 this year. KIF1A wasn't even discovered until like 2012. And so, she's a 2000s baby. So she was 12 by the time it was even known. And so the issues that Athena experiences and the needs that she have are going to be different than a lot of our families who are going to be in that younger age range. They still have kids in school, right? They haven't had those challenges of transitioning to care from 18 to 22, and those things. And I think it's really important for kind of like the foresight of an organization to make sure you're thinking about those different age demographics so you can understand how your policy and your engagement maybe is going to change over the course of the condition and the course of someone's lives.
And may I add something actually, because I was just listening to everyone, and I'm sure Jim and Kelly can certainly relate to this or probably have thoughts about it too, is that ensure that on your board or in your leadership that you have individuals who, I mean, we can be very passionate individuals and really want to press certain things, but to have the business and just sort of the organizational structure of an organization that's really business focused and stable, and that keeps everyone running on those tracks too, while alongside trying to move all of our policy issues. I think that's really helpful because it's really hard to undo that if you have bad habits or just don't know, right, to build that really strong foundation. It's really hard to do that and the advocacy, but I think it's very important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we could certainly have a whole separate webinar about boards, and how to build a board and work with them. But having that, really looking at the organization as a business and then having a board who can support that business and hopefully provide you with resources that you otherwise might not be able to take on yourself, like pro bono legal counsel or accounting help. That kind of thing can be transformational. It certainly has been one of the key factors for us as we've grown over the years. And 16 years in, we still rely on our board very, very heavily for much of that, but also for the general oversight. And one of the things that I think has been very, very helpful for us, especially in recent years, is having really focusing on the treasurer of our board and having someone who could help us to better budget and project. And rather than operate year to year, which can, certainly just be the case when you're a donor-driven organization, really within that build strategy and build a budgeting plan to help you grow. So, I think it's important to find expertise in all different areas to have on your board, as well as, of course, people who are passionate about the organization. But we've really found that financial expertise to be just extremely helpful to us in the past few years, especially as we've tried to continue to professionalize on an ongoing basis.
And I know you do a lot of research funding, and I was wondering if you could very briefly talk about the Shark Tank that you do and kind of some of the experience there. I know raising funding and then finding ways to effectively leverage that funding to drive towards cures is something that many patient groups are struggling with as they're starting out.
Sure. So we've changed our approach a little bit over the years. As a new organization, when we were started, our primary focus was funding research grants. So we raised money and we gave grants. And it was very, very important work, and it's work that we're certainly proud of, and we still continue to a small degree. But as time went on, kind of the sustainability of that model became a little more difficult, and certainly following that model through the ups and downs of markets and how that impacts donors and that kinds of thing became more clear. So we switched our model to one where rather than funding grants, we're basically driving our own research initiatives within our foundation. And that primarily comes in the form of a clinical trial that we developed and we're operating and paying for ourselves. So that trial sort of it has a direct patient element where patients are able to get genomic testing and treatment recommendations, but also has a research component where we're generating extensive genomic data on rare cancers that otherwise don't get looked at. So again, this would probably be a broader conversation, but for us, as we continued on in the years, shifting our focus away from a little more of a niche funding organization and turning it into something more broad, where we're able to take on a pretty large research study ourselves, really proved to be transformational and allow us to reach a much broader audience, bring in a whole new network of people that we hadn't been working with previously, and has really helped us a lot. So, I think the time has to be right for something like that, and it took us the better part of a decade to get to the point where we would do that. But it's really been the right move, and I think it represents now a strategy we'll follow going forward.
And similar, but a little bit different, Jim, is, same thing with our very first grant, back in 2012, we gave to a scientific researcher who ended up moving his lab to another country. And, that was really disappointing. We worked so hard to raise that first $25,000 and we really didn't see the fruits of that labor. So it was really discouraging. But fast forward, we really tried to model what some of the bigger, longstanding organizations have done before us. And so now we're doing more investments in smaller startup biotechs that are showing interest in the space to hopefully have a nice return on that investment. And it hasn't happened yet, but rather than just giving grants away and hoping for the best, we're at least investing in something that with convertible note, so that we hopefully have a seat at the table as things get approved down the road or bought out. But also partnering with those companies that you are investing in or giving grants to. And when we first started, we were paying to do our own documentaries to build awareness programs. We were paying for, it was a lot of expense to build some of those awareness campaigns and even advocacy programs. But, we've created this partnership with some of the biotechs in the space where we offer them a lot of our time, doing patient focus groups, participating in educational webinars to the patient community. And in turn, they're giving us grants and stipends to help us support our initiatives like documentaries and travel stipends and things like that for our patient conferences. So I think there's a really great relationship there that you can build if you are lucky enough to have industry in the space of your disease area and to really create a marriage. I mean, one of my best friends is the director of advocacy of one of the companies that we work with because we talk so often, and we really have this beautiful relationship where we're sort of building that bridge between the patient community and the industry side to really share the patient voice with back to them.
Switching gears just a little bit, and I know, Pat, you started bringing it up already, but with so much to do and always such limited staff and resources, I would love all of your thoughts about how to prioritize. In particular, how do you prioritize whether to engage on an issue and how to engage? And again, I know you already started talking about it. But would love more thoughts and advice on like how to think through that.
Yeah, no, some of it is putting it through that lens of, is it specific to our disease or is it something that's more systemic? And so that's part of it, but it's also assessing, the level of impact. Is it impacting everybody? Is it impacting a subset of the population? That's certainly another factor. And then who else is doing the work? Is it another lupus group? Is it more in, for us, is it autoimmune? Or is it more blanket, covering everybody? So each of those different, putting through those different filters helps us to figure out how we can approach the issue. Is it something that's more coalition where we're a little bit hands off, and we just kind of go with the flow with what the coalition's doing? Or is it more that we're leading coalition, helping to lead coalition activities in partnership with other organizations, so that we're doing some of the work, but not all the work? Or is it something that we're doing it on our own? And so, but all those different things is, whether it's, lupus specific, whether it's a lupus specific issue, whether it, impacts a subset of the community or a larger portion. Those all come into play. The other thing too and I think it's Shira, you may have brought this up earlier, is that like short term versus long term. Because there are policy issues that don't. We used to say that they have legs or they don't, do they not? There are things that may be identified with, as you reach out to your communities, and they may be identified as priorities, but there isn't either the political climate, um, or legislative opportunity or regulatory opportunity to move that issue right now. Are there interim things that we can do and look at this as a long-term issue? And so that's another factor that we're looking at are there opportunities to move this forward now? And if so, what are they? And so that's helped us prioritize, because there are some issues, whether I think about lupus, I think about my days in ALS, that we could spend decades spinning our wheels on. but there are things that we can do now that could make a difference in someone's life. And I remember working on some early things. This goes back in the ALS world. We were working on some things related to the VA and access to benefits. And it started slowly by identifying some volunteers who could help to kind of navigate the system. And as we were doing that, we were advocating for benefits and we were working the regulatory process and working through the legislative process as well. But we were doing something, recognizing this would take some time. We did some interim things that could help people now, but at the same time get more people involved. And so that was leveraging volunteers. So they were in providing assistance to people, something that they didn't have before. Was it the ultimate goal at the time? No, but it was a step towards getting to the ultimate goal. So that's just another thing that we've done, especially on those long-term issues. Um, so
Yeah, and I'll just add too, I think one of the things I've especially seen with like KIF 1A is like the organization, very much like Kelly and Jim, it started out as like a research focused organization to really invest in studying KIF 1A and identifying a treatment for KIF 1A. And now as the organization is growing, we're taking on like these new policy legs. And I think we're very privileged because I get to bring in all my experience from my full-time job, right, to this volunteer role. And so we're very fortunate in that way that I get to kind of double dip. But I think for other organizations who are going through that transition, there's kind of some like fundamental questions you have to ask yourself. So like the first one is, I think, what is the problem? And then once you figure out exactly what the problem is, right? Because maybe there's 5 or 6 different pieces of the problem, but once you figure out what the one you want to focus on is, you have to ask yourself, who has the ability to fix the problem? Is it someone at the state level? Is it someone at the federal level? And then once you figure that out and you've talked to that agency or entity, asking yourself, why aren't they fixing the problem? Is it they just don't have incentive to enforce the law or the requirements? Or do they need something like Pat said, like they need a push in the political environment? And so I think once you kind of answer those 3 questions from the policy perspective to figure out what the problem is and what the solution is, then you can kind of go forward with like the more practical steps of, okay, is this a long-term strategy? Is this a short-term fix? And get those short and long-term goals to address that issue.
And I agree again with all my colleagues. And I would say that a process, you don't have to over process it. It doesn't have to be super involved, but to have a process of how you determine it so that you can communicate that to your community, if you have the resources to do that, I think is important, because you get a lot of emails and calls. Why can't you work on this? Why can't you do this? And all of these are very individualized, very important issues. But if you're able to establish a process of how you determine that, whether you start with a survey, however you determine that, and then be able to communicate that to your community and then say, these are the bucket areas that we're focused on for these reasons, I think helps you go further and helps you at least be able to control maybe the buckets of the areas that you're being asked to take on. So, and being able to say no sometimes too.
And Kelly, I know that you've mentioned that you had your first Hill Day last year, which I know was amazing. And you mentioned that you are increasingly engaging in policy issues. And I know I've seen a lot of the amazing advocacy that you have done on the PRV reauthorization, etc. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the experiences there? How did you go about that first Hill Day? And like, how, can you talk a little bit about your experiences diving deeper into policy?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And it's been interesting hearing all the different perspectives because I'm thinking in my head, yep, we did that. Oh no, we haven't done that yet. So it's such a great conversation because I think everybody brings some different level of experience to the table. But yes, so my first time on the Hill was with Every Life Foundation's Rare Disease Day, and I realized I was the only person there from the limb-girdle community. And I thought, well, 32 subtypes, I shouldn't be the only one here. So I kind of went back to my colleagues that I work with in the other subtypes and said, guys, we need to do something like this. Either all of us show up on the Rare Disease Hill Day, or let's do our own. So that's kind of what happened. We had the conversation and said, we have enough bandwidth here that if we work together, we can have our first day on the Hill. Mind you, we had 50 people, not, 5,000, but it was a really good start for our first year. And we were able to, team up with the several different leaders of the different advocacy orgs. We were able to get some funding from the support from the biotechs in the space, and having that leadership of bringing on, we had used Thorn Run Partners and Canary Advisors helped us because again, it was our first time. So having us set up those Hill meetings and some of that support work for us having been there really the first time on our own was really key to that. And it was great. We're going to do it again this year. And but to your point that you had said earlier, Kim, is prior to going, I did a survey to our LGMD community and said, out of all the, sort of legislative asks that could be out there, which would be the most impactful and meaningful to you? So we sort of took those top 3 or 4 answers that the community came back. And so that's what we really focused on our talks, because as I said earlier, most members of our community can't get there. It's hard to get on a plane if you're fully wheelchair bound. It's hard to travel across the country if you're not near a DC. And for those of us that could get there, we really wanted to be the voices of the entire community and really represent what was most impactful for all of our patients that are affected by this disease. So, we look forward to getting back there again and continuing to learn from calls like this to see what's happening. So it's evolving, for sure.
I want to make sure we have enough time for questions, but before we go there, Kim and Pat, I was wondering if each of you can give a brief summary of some of the resources that you provide as umbrella organizations to patient groups. I know you're doing a lot of sign-on letters and educational materials and webinars, so there's a lot that you all are doing. But if you can give just a few highlights, and again, we can follow up with relevant links, etc., after the call for people who are interested in learning more. But Kimberly, do you want to start?
Sure. So as a member, especially if you're a policy staff or whomever, can attend 2 key, we have sort of signature events that we hold each year that are free as part of your membership. One is a Washington Reps June meeting. So we're preparing for that for June 6th here in DC. We have an entire slate of panels. We have a House panel, Senate panel. We're inviting someone from the administration. We have a keynote. And it's also a way for patient advocacy organizations to meet one another, share best practices. Part of the agenda will be dedicated to that also. And then for this year's meeting, but we hold these each year. And then in the fall, we also hold a Washington Retreats meeting and done in a similar vein. And these are really to address some of the top issues that are happening, some of the best practices that policy professionals can sort of capitalize on and share and connect with each other. And then monthly we hold GRAT meetings, Government Relations Action Team meetings, and we do our best to develop agendas that are relevant to the moment, but also ways that we're making sure that policy professionals and some of our partner organizations connect and share with each other every month.
Well, I guess I'll build on that a little bit, and I certainly wholeheartedly endorse the Health Council. I've been participating in a number of years, and I've met many of the people on this call through the Health Council. So for the MapRx Coalition, there's a variety of things that we do, but it's everything Medicare Part D, and not a lot of us have the opportunity to really get in the weeds and understand the nuances of Medicare Part D, and that's what the coalition helps to do. And whether that's through coalition meetings that we have, regular meetings that bring the patient community together to educate the community about the issues, where the opportunities to engage are, or it's to our either Hill letters or comment letters to CMS that are a combination of sign on, but we also encourage organizations to adapt our materials, MapRx materials, to their disease or condition. So everything that we produce is available for organizations to either take as is or brand it as their own and adjust it. And kind of going back in the history of MapRx, it was created when Part D was created In 2006 was when Part D was implemented. And the coalition, one of the first things that the coalition did was create an open enrollment guide. So a guide of how to navigate open enrollment, pick a plan that's best for you. And we do this every year, and it's something that can be adapted. You can make it very specific to your disease, and it can be branded to your organization. That's just an example of one of the resources that we have. And over the past couple of years, there's been a lot going on in Part D with the Inflation Reduction Act and implementation of that and everything that's come since. The coalition really helps organizations to weigh in on a topic and on issues that really impact so many of us as organizations, and to do it in a way that's not a huge lift for each individual organization, since we all are all somewhat limited in our bandwidth. So that's a little bit more about MapRx. And it's free to participate, I will say that, for patient groups.
Thank you so much. With that, I would love to see if there are any questions from the audience. Not seeing any questions right now. While people get the questions ready, one question to everyone. Do you have any advice on any tools or any places to go for organizations that are starting out to learn more about policy or fundraising or any of the things that we talked about today? What's your favorite go-to resource, or where would you send people? And I don't know who wants to go first. Ashira, maybe?
Sure. So I'll do a shameless plug for Angel Alliance. We have a coveragerights.org website, and it's one of my favorite resources because it provides instructions on how to file appeals in every single state. And I think filing an appeal for a benefit denial is like the first step of becoming an advocate, because I think research shows that like 50% of claim denials that are appealed are actually approved. So it can be a really powerful tool, and I think really something that helps families. So coveragerights.org, everyone, please share it.
And I'll say I'm certainly as a part of the rare disease community. Also as a member of the organization. I would mention NORD as a place that offers tremendous resources to members on all the topics you mentioned, Karen, plus more. But what I would really recommend in that is attending something like NORD's Summit that happens every year. I know, like I said earlier, Global Genes has one as well. There's a lot of different organizations that hold these meetings, and what they do is they bring groups just like the ones on this call together. And there's just a tremendous amount to learn, even if it's not in your same disease area, from people who have built organizations and are doing really well in different areas. And I think this call is perfect example of that. So just meet as many people as you can, and a great way to do it is by attending those conferences.
I was going to mention a lot of those same names, Jim. But also on top of that is maybe there's also a bigger umbrella organization that's more specific to your disease type. So for us, the Muscular Dystrophy Association is a huge umbrella organization, but is all neuromuscular disease focused. So they have amazing conferences, and it's such a great way to go and network. And we have, a smaller advocacy meeting within that bigger meeting. Same thing with ASGCT, which is starting tomorrow anyway. They have a great advocacy meetup where you're working a lot of work, working groups of advocates that can really share some of those stories. So that, there's so many resources out there. Again, I personally don't have anything to share outside of our limb-girdle space necessarily, but there's always ways to tap into those bigger umbrella orgs. There's just so many great resources out there. So, and if you can get to conferences like that where you can meet in person and shake hands, it's really been impactful for me to network and meet more people that way.
Fantastic.
I agree 100%. And yeah, whether that's disease specific kind of coalitions or disease area or more the broader umbrella group, like ignored, or Every Life, or Health Council. All those are really important. And then getting to know people, and that can help in so many other ways. And even things outside of what you may do day to day, but things that your organization does. So certainly getting connected is a huge issue.
So we're almost out of time. Kimberly, last thought from you.
I would say too, I mean, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I do read a lot of newspapers or now online, but a lot of like Politico, all these online papers and especially relevant to DC have a lot of free webinars that are really helpful when they're talking about like reconciliation or appropriations, things like that. You can send to your constituents or to your board to understand sort of the greater landscape, and those are usually free. So I rely on those two to share among staff, and even myself, I log into those too.
Fantastic. With that, I know we're out of time. And Ashura, thank you so much for the call out for the Biopatient Advocacy Summit, which is going to be happening at the end of October in DC. A lot more to come. It will be free for patient groups to attend. And we, again, will try to create really timely programming on a lot of the issues we discussed today. We'll be following up with a number of the resources that were mentioned. And just thank you so much to our panelists. This was a fantastic conversation, and thank you to everybody who attended the May Coffee Chat. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.